Beis, Volume 1. We just finished chapter 225. We have to go over one piece, and we'll begin chapter 226. So we're in the middle of a discussion how the deepest darkness reveals the deepest dimensions above. Basically, the halamas v'estadim, the concealments down below in Golus, are rooted in the deepest love. As we learned with the father and the child, I wouldn't even say a child, I guess, because basically it's not really a kid. He's talking about a mature element of musar. That in the rebuke lies the deepest love. Because if he didn't care, he wouldn't apply himself. So Golus is that in a collective sense. That the lichluch, what do we call the lichluch? The soiled, I said, what did I call lichluch? The stained elements that are causing a human being, and the neshama, lamata causes the Golus, so it comes from the deepest love. So it goes both ways. From the susim, the deepest love, which is completely concealed, core love, connection, is revealed in the negative, in something that appears the exact opposite. And vice versa, as he said, what was the expression he said? The commensurate, the proportion. Kfi erech hashuv, shu agili kacha b'chinas haratzeh. Kshamshachu is galus atzmi. So if there is galus is only of reflection, a lower dimension, then the place it's coming from is also not such a deep dimension. But kshamshachu is galus atzmi, haratzi shebitchilu hu gam kim b'chinas cheshik v'helam ba'etzem. So when the one hamshacha, which will be like la'asad love and Mashiach, that should be atzmi, so the rotzi, the mloimati, the concealment also has to be at a core dimension, which is like going the other direction. First he said that the core love is not revealed in a regular day-to-day routine relationship. You have gvura, but it's gvura shebechesed, as we learned. It's a relative concealment. Where is it revealed? Dafka in the opposite. Like you see, when two people, everything is going well is one thing. When there's a betrayal, when a crisis, that's when you see the depth. I always mention this about Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, came out of a chet. When did we see this kashas atzmis? When Moshe went up on the mountain. First of all, the kashas of Moshe to Am Yisrael. I'm not saying that the Rebbe Rashab says in Samach Vav, hachet nisker, does a sinner get rewarded? You know, we get the second luchas and Yom Kippur and everything. And he explains there what that means. But the point is, had there been no chet egel, I just want to capture a good example, I believe, for this. You wouldn't have seen Moshe's love for the Jews to that extent, where he says, erase my name, where he breaks the luchas, where he's mamish mesa nefesh. You would never see the depth of the love of God to the people. It only came in a time of crisis, the darkest moment, and that brought out the deepest connection. Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, Yom Kippur, that till this day we have hope. We have a day of hope, forgiveness. That even when something breaks, and even when something was, there's no such thing as hopeless. There's always an opening. But it came through dafka the opposite. And here, of course, he's talking also, he's not talking about how it evokes it, he's talking about the fact that the Eibishter sends Yidden and Golus is the deepest expression of love, because it's, you can always ask why that way, but bottom line is because he cares so much. And they need to go through their repair, and he can't do it for us. So when the father sends the child away in exile, it's the deepest expression of his love, except it's concealed. Yeah, and in it lies the deepest. But it's also the other way around. To reach that shasam etzem, you need to go into the deepest type of concealment. Right. Okay. So it goes both ways. See, in Kippur, it's through Mechila. It's not through rebuke necessarily. Okay, good, but we do tshuva, and there was the punishment. So now let's do the parentheses which we did not do. Then we'll move to the next chapter. So there's a parentheses on page 456. That's Tzimtzum Harishon. Remember, a little earlier he said that where is Bichlal darkness and light? So in general, this is the Tzimtzum Harishon that precedes the Kav. That's what he said a little earlier, up on top, right? Let's just go back. He says, the B'chinas Leim, what you in that Tzimtzum Harishon, Shu B'chinas Leim. We said, Bereishach HaShecha Hadar Nohera. As he said, that first comes the Leim Mati, then the Mati. That's Galus Mitzrayim and Matan Torah. Now, just as an aside, I think someone asked me, so what are we saying? Is it because the Eibishter wanted to give us a Gili of Matan Torah, that's why we had to go through Galus Mitzrayim? Or is it because there was a Lichluch before, so you had to then have rebuke, which itself revealed the deeper thing, and then Matan Torah? It's a very good question. This goes back to the questions whether God set the whole thing up in the first place.
There's no Lichluch before you just were saying.
No, it means Chetei Tzadas and so on. No, here it's clear that Yitzis Mitzrayim precedes Matan Torah, the Helam precedes the Gili of Helam Atzmi. But we're going back to the Moshel. Golus here, he said, is an in of Musas. So Golus Mitzrayim is like a kilu, a punishment. By Mitzrayim you don't say that. Mitzrayim, the Eibishter says, V'avdu v'inoesim, v'achar ken yetzi v'rechush gadol. There it's mashma, that's because of the rechush gadol. Right. It's not. It's interesting. Golus Mitzrayim is the only Golus you talk as an Enish. Because what are they being punished for? Just mentioning that. Because all other Golus is befedish a tikkun for there was a problem. Golus Edom, Golus Bavel. There was the reasons of a Zareh, Sinas Chinam. But at the end of the day, you have to say Golus Mitzrayim is part of the Birur, Kur HaBazel. It's true, it leads to Matan Torah, but it's also part of the birur of what happened till then. Because if there was no Chetei Tzadas, there probably would not have to be a Golus Mitzrayim. Anyway, I'm just saying that a Chagav, it's a nice, just a point that just rounds it out. Here, okay, so he called it the Tzimtzum and the Kav. Right? So now, there's apparently a question here. We just said that the Tzimtzum Harishon is complete siluk. Remember, we said it's not just a diminished light; it's complete removal. So, what should that lead to, based on this klal? That is commensurate; it should lead to complete gilui. Why only a kav? The Tzimtzum should lead to the biggest gilui atzmi. Yesh leimer mepnei shehaya tchila hagilui be'elam. Kedim shei yisavas ishtalshlus. What was it? Pnei shei tchilas hagili be'elam. Kedim shei yisavas ishtalshlus. Yitzarach lid b'chinas heder er. Shleimer. Pnei shei tchilas hagili be'elam. I'm not sure what it says here. Any help?
What, the first line?
The first yesh shleimer. So therefore, why is it ha'ara? You just said that it should be hamshachas etzem. Look right before the parentheses. Remember, parentheses coming right after. It should be l'cheira agili cheshchel hamshach was gals et atzmi.
He's saying before the Tzimtzum there was a.
That's not what he's saying.
Before the Cheshecha,
there's no Elam. You can't say that on Elam.
Before the Cheshecha.
I don't think he's saying that. Hold on, let me just read it again. But how could he say Elam? There's no Elam. Agili be'elam? No, 1 second.
What's the problem? That because the Tzimtzum was a real Cheshecha, that's why the light afterwards...
No, the other way around. Since the Kav is only ha'ara, so what should have preceded it should have been not such a big Tzimtzum.
So Tzimtzum should have only been covering
I think, not a complete siluk. What's it? Pnei tchilas hagili be'elam kedim shei tchilas hagili be'elam kedim shei yisavas.
So first you have to be had.
I think what he's saying is that the fact that what's up? The Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum, I don't think he's referring to here at all, in my opinion. I may be wrong. Let me just tell you how I understand. I think that what he's saying here is like this. Let's go back a line before. Let's read it again. The line before that, what did he say? So since the kav is only ha'ara levad, so what precedes it should have been only a helam levad. The fact that the kav, so how do you explain the tzimtzum b'yachas to the kav? The tzimtzum didn't. So what he's saying, one way I could touch it is because the kav is the first gili, the first time there's any gili in existence before anything came into being, so it needed to be preceded by a state of heder ha'er. In other words, what I'm saying is there's an additional.
Not so intense, what you mean?
No.
The tzimtzum was the total tzimtzum. So the question is, why shouldn't it be like a eiratzmi? It's only a kav.
The question is really the other way around. I think it's the other way around. Okay. Because the kav is only ha'ara, what do you need a full tzimtzum? I think that's how he's asking it.
And so he's
answering. Because the kav was tchilas hagili. It works like this. Before there was a seder shtalshus, comes the kav.
It's because heder has to be total heder. Why? Because
it was the first one.
Right, it's mashmad because it's the first gilui, so it's a special case basically. In general, let me put it this way. In regular seder shtalshus, it goes like this. Once you have seder shtalshus, there's eir and cheshach. So, if for example the day breaks, the day is only ha'ara, so the night is also not a cheshach atzmi. If you want to, if the gilui is a very powerful gilui like Mashiach or Matan Torah, you need a helam atzmi like Golas Mitzrayim and Golas Ha'achron. Good. That's once you have already Eir and Gilui. But the first time, the first gilui, that's what's mashman. I think what it says. It's very bekitzer and very. I mean, I'm happy. I would love that he would say what you said. What you're saying like this. Because that's what we said yesterday. What did we say yesterday? That the tzimtzum. What's the question of the tzimtzum? The Ein Sof Hayim Malakol Metzias. So you need to completely conceal that. So that's why you need a tzimtzum b'derech siluk.
In order to create worlds, you need to have a total.
Right. That's why the tzimtzum is a tzimtzum asmi, because it has to conceal Ein Sof that encompasses everything. We learned this at length.
It wouldn't give room for elements.
Right, there'd be no room for elements. So that's what passes why the tzimtzum is a.
But
then the line afterwards would be
should be based on that. Should be a eratzmi. Yeah, but there you could say there's a special reason because there was an Ein Sof Lifnei tzimtzum. That's why.
And there was a total different paradigm.
Right. Like the reason we have a heavy golus like this is not because there was Ein Sof Lifnei golus. Is because we want to have a gili atzmi. That's why you need a cheshach atzmi. The tzimtzum addition, you could say, but he doesn't answer that. That's what I mentioned yesterday, I believe, right? L'cheda, that's what would be the obvious reason why the tzimtzum is complete. Okay, fine.
Well, you could type in the word.
I don't think how.
Because there was something before.
But you can't say elam. You can't say tchila gili be'elam, because be'elam. See, be'elam means in existence. Before there was a shtalshlus, there was kav is the first gili. Yeah, because the shtalshlus there's elam and the shtalshlus. Elam means the first gili after the tzimtzum. You can't say tchilas gili be'elam means before the tzimtzum. There's no way. It never works.
Gili be'elam doesn't mean before the tzimtzum.
You can't say before the tzimtzum.
Be'elam is not before.
Then he would have said, he should have said like this, Yashleim Pnei, Shalifnei ad tzimtzum, Haya Ein Sof Malakol Metzias, B'mele Tzorech Liyas, Tzimtzum B'derech Siluk. The reason that's not sufficient, I think, is because then what do you do with the kav? Why is the kav only a ha'ara when you had a siluk? So good, you could say because it is. Anyway, I would read it because the first time you need a state of heder eir. So the focus here is that it's an exception, basically. It's a yetzim and a klal, and he's not focusing so much on the tzimtzum being complete. Bottom line is you cannot have a gili in elam without first heder eir because there's.
There's also
Yeah.
these words kaid.
It could also-
Why does he have to say that? If you wouldn't say those words kaid, we'd be able to read it. Why is he like inserting those
saying the
words?
reason
I think
is
because Ishtalshlus is what I said before. Because Ishtalshlus, you already have once Ishtalshlus exists, Eir and Cheshach has a whole new. Look, it's very big kitzur. You could technically read like this. Yesh leim pnei shayetchilas hagili ba'elam. Why? Because before that, the Eir of Livnei Kol HaMetzias was completely concealed by the Tzimtzum. So this is the first gili. So you need to have b'chinas hedra Eir.
But even that he doesn't.
Anyway.
Why do you need Bechinas Said?
The pashtas because the world cannot tolerate Eir Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum. The pashtas, that's the reason. That's what I'm saying. It's very big kitzur. Look, we could heard of it. I'm sure we'll read it 10, 15 more times. We'll get somewhere. Let's see the second touch.
And then the zweite text on the second.
Oh, yes, Shleimer. So, look, it's a very, very big kitzur. That's why we said we're going to read it separately. Okay. I'm open to hear more interpretation. I'm just trying to penetrate. Now you can also touch head of the Eri, doesn't mean the Tzimtzum. Maybe it means that's why the Kav is only Ha'ara. You could touch Paket. The Kav, in other words, even though the Tzimtzum is a Helam Atzmi, a fundamental concealment, since the Kav is the first Gili in existence, it has to come very diminished. But the word head of the Eri is not really correct. It should have said, so it's Ha'ara Lavad. The fact that he says head of the Eri,
You should have said silica for the Tzimtzum, right?
the line needs explanation. What can I say? Let's go to the second one. Maybe the second one will help illuminate the first. No, seriously. Because sometimes you see the Rebbe Rashab's train of thought. So you can go back and say, okay, Oye Shleimer. This is not a bissel chassidus.
He does use the word before hedre. Silica hedre.
Yeah.
You saw that, like a couple lines before that.
Before the parentheses?
Yeah, like 10 lines before.
Yeah.
On the right side.
Okay, I'm definitely laying the whole thing again. Silica erve hedre, yeah.
He uses the word hedre on the Tzimtzum.
Maybe you have to look in Pasach Aliyah. Geen nikra mokum shu b'chin sedre. Gam she'en nikra murgish afila b'kayach. That may be the key. Because he's saying, remember, ein murgish afila b'kayach. The Tzimtzum initiation is so intense that you can't even see potential light. So the answer is, first Yesh Leimer, because it's the first Gili, you have to have a complete type of concealment. In other words, it is for a special reason. It's not. It's an exception to what we're discussing in this chapter here. In the chapter he's speaking, Helam Atzmi leads Gili Atzmi. Gili Atzmi comes from Helam Atzmi. Here you're talking about a particular circumstance. Okay, fine.
Back in Pasach Aliyah, he uses the word hedre and not silica.
He says, "B'sisi afila b'kech shezeh has gabas b'kin sachesh v'helm ala erva Gili." V'hainu v'acha Gili. Okay, Gili. Erech hashuv. Okay. So that's one way. It's almost like saying that when a child is born, you cannot. Has to be complete concealment. Okay. You have to have a header. Okay. Oy shleimer. So oy. Or you can say, Shezeu b'shil hamshachas b'chinas primis akav. That attack it does mechuven to what we're discussing here. That the Tzimtzum addition. Why was it a complete halamatmi? Because it's taka leading tam primis akav.
The kav is not on the other.
Right, the kav has within it the potential for that. Yeah, that's more consistent with the whole discussion.
That's what he taka accepts.
The ima yesh mashnas galo b'chinas ara levad, even though what revealed b'poil in actuality is only a reflection. Makom makom hariyat tzimtzum b'china b'rdeishi amshachas ha'era atzmi. There you go. But the kavan of the tzimtzum is really there should be hamshach ha'era atzmi. However, it's in stages.
The primis akav is Atzmi?
Yeah, that's for sure. Like he says in Emek HaMelech, the tachlis hakavone ba'at tzimtzum. What was the ultimate purpose in the tzimtzum, in the concealment? In order for the gili kedem tzimtzum. Umavur b'maknach shezeh l'mayla harbe. Mekamay shayeris of a mala makam achol lifnei tzimtzum. Because the question, Samach Vav, he says afterwards, Samach Vav. Because the question then is, Mahivichu, what do you gain?
If you just go back to
It's like going back. So in Samach Vav he gives two answers. One is you gain that it's now in Kalim after the Tzimtzum, but that suffices. He says you have to say that you have a bigger gili. So it wasn't just the Gilui, Helam, and back to the Gilui, back to square one, you have to say, and that's because God desired there should be a dira. So when there's a dira, it's not just what you had before. The tzimtzum was not a game, like, conceal to reveal, conceal, reveal. Because now you had the helam in order for there to be tachteinim. See, the sava is butter, so now you have a gili of this nesava. Shahu gili, b'chinas atzmus ein sof mamash, b'chinas pnimis akav. That's the gili of atzmus ein sof mamash, b'chinas akav. Whole idea, haveda, b'chinas helam, yeah. U'kamay be'esik. Oh, that's important. Right. The whole Havana of this chapter. And this is through the work in the Helam. In other words, according to the first Yesh Leimer, it's a technical matter. The first Gili, so you need to have a head of the Eir. The second one says, no, Taka, the Helam of the Tzimtzum, when you work in there, you reveal not just the Hara of the Kav, you reveal Primis HaKav, which is Mushalish Lifnei HaTzimtzum, which is Mushalish even higher than Lifnei HaTzimtzum in the Nesava, because it's fulfilling the Atzmizdik HaKavona. So the Tzimtzum at the end of the day is consistent with what we're discussing here. And I absolutely, the first Yesh Leimer you have to say the way I said Pshat now. And I don't even know why he said it, because L'cheda, why do you have to bring the first Yesh Leimer? What's it Tzricha? Let me just finish here. I'll tell you in a second what I think. And listen, going back to the theme, the Kabbalah sale also reaches there.
Which is all the way to tiny, which is outside.
Right, exactly. So in other words, he keeps on saying, because it's two ways. Erche is either through tshuva, or because he wants to bavon that you could get there. You don't must get there through a chet, basically. A tzaddik can get there. Someone with enough Kabbalah sale and Mesid and Nesina can also. Obviously, Erchez of Tshuva gets there deeper probably and
maybe faster.
Right in the beginning, because the first Maimer, and then he continues. This is a big part of the theme there. Because there he talks also actually this is the theme of Samach Vav. The Aveda in the Helam, remember I've talked about this. The Ben Shanas Eved. There it's all about Eved. Aveda B'Keich Hatzmei, Kabbalah Seil, Yigiyah, Eved Pashut, Eved Nem, and the whole thing. And Esek HaTeirah Kol Mol Shal Chema. That's a big, big theme there. And that's and that it reaches the Primis Akav and Atz Mesele and Sof. Well, I'll tell you why I think he's bringing the first Pshat. Because technically speaking, in the actual process, you still have a problem. Based on his klal, Helam Atzmi, Gili Atzmi. So he's also, the answer gives us the process. The second answer gives us the real, deeper Kavanah. In other words, in the process, there's also need a reason. And the answer is because the first Gili, so that's why you need a head of the Ein and then a Kav, which is only harder. And Yesh Leimer, so even though it's a Oy, but it looks almost like Ba'emek cases, if you want to really touch it that way. Anyway, that's my thought. And I think that's the Pshat in the first line, because you have to distinguish. It can't be the same Yesh Leimer for sure. So the first one, okay, that's good. It's a very fundamental chapter on Golus, on Helam. And I've been learning, because for the thing I'm doing Sunday nights, Tanya, Perek Chav Zayin, when he talks about why you shouldn't be atzvus when you have a Helam, when there's something, basically Yisurim Ba'ava. So he says, because he says a few things there. First of all, by being weak, you can't fight. You're demoralized, so you have to do it with strength. Number two, the Meridus is because you're distant from Elikus. Number three, that really there's a chesed nelam in Yisurim. In the opposite. Mamish what he says here. And that chesed can be revealed, you reveal it through your not being disturbed by it. What he said before, by the fact that you don't allow yourself. In other words, the idea, the thing exactly what happens to us when something's not working well. Let's say we have an Ayin, we have a Yetzer Hara. You could fall very much down. The Yetzer Hara is schlepping me down. Look what I'm doing. So in Tanya, what he says is that good for schlepping down is also the Yetzer Hara's work. What you have to feel is that is what God sent you, such a battle, such an Ayin, and that in there's a deeper good. And if you don't give in to be demoralized and weakened by it, that alone reveals the deeper good. It's a tremendous concept.
But on the other hand,
Because he's turning the whole thing upside down. Usually, you think, he says, even next chapter, he says, when somebody have machshava zara during davening, so he says, usually, you think, look how bad I am. So he says, no, the machshava zara is not coming from your davening, from your nefesh alikis, it's coming from another nefesh. So he says, if it came from the nefesh alikis, that would be a very bad sign. But if you know that there's a second voice inside of you, that itself should lift you up. He's turning the whole thing. Usually what depresses us, he's saying, is that self should give you simcha, not depress you. It's like when God gives you the challenge, you should see it as he's giving you a vote of confidence, that you can do it. And when you do it, that itself is the reason for the challenge.
if you don't do it, then you become demoralized.
That's the catch 22.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So there's no, so he explains Yetzav there is not because of demoralization, to feel that you're distant.
If it doesn't matter to you, if it's all nonchalant.
No, I didn't say it doesn't matter. The question is why it matters. It matters because I'm worthless because look how bad I am, or it matters because it brought me distant from my moket, from God. It's a very big difference. Because the first one weakens you, the second one motivates you. If you knew that, let's say, someone you love deeply says to you, listen, I can't talk to you anymore now. You hurt me. So you could look at it two ways. You could go back and say, look, I'm a terrible person. Look what I did. Which of course demoralizes you further. And then, or you could say, you know what? I want to earn my way back. Very big different attitude. So both is painful because you're not with you were sent away. You see what I'm saying? So I understand. The question is, how do you get, the question everyone asks is, okay, fine. I understand I shouldn't be demoralized, but I am demoralized. What am I supposed to do? It goes back to the same thing. I think you need to have people, what I said yesterday, I said it also last night. If you don't have people who love you, that support you in that effort, that believe in you, and confidence, is very difficult because you keep beating yourself up. And that beating yourself up doesn't let you fight the war.
You're busy beating yourself up.
Right. That's why it's a tremendous concept. When I see that one of the biggest things what a Rebbe does, the Rebbe sends you somewhere on the shlichus, and the shlichus has impediments. But he sent you. He said to you, you can do it. The settled to Moshe Hecht. That you could do it. So even when you're in the lowest thing, you say, good, I don't believe in myself, but my Rebbe said I could do it. So there's no room here for me to undermine what he said, which is one of the most, what Chassidim always knew. You're mitzugi pun eben. So if you know that, really inside of you, even if all else fails, that's really the power of betachon. People say betachon. It's one of the questions I just got. I got unbelievable amount of questions just last night, today. So about betachon. When you open up the can, alles kommt heraus. But Baruch Hashem, that's a big bracha. I'm keeping it inside. So betachon really means, it's not some crazy thing, taku v'zayin. You're tying yourself to a force that you say, I'm drowning. Give me a rope. Oh, I see a rope. You hold on to it for your very life. That is ultimately what betachon is. That's why I don't, from a point of view of pure psychology, without a God, I don't see how a human being can make it through life. Unless they're in denial, or they just become mushchasim. Without a God. No, just the concept, because it's a force that says, I put you here, I gave you power, and you could hold on to me when you need it. I just said, Viktor Frankl says as much in this book, when he was, Viktor Frankl, Man in Search of Meaning. So he was with Holocaust survivors. He was in the concentration camps. He developed the whole thing. He said the people that were believers in God, and he did not count himself as one of those. He was more secular. They had a power, he says, none of us had. Because they felt their life had meaning. This whole churban, but there's still a deeper meaning to everything. It's the connection, there's no question about it. V'hi sham dalam. It's a v'hi, it's a munah, the promise, avtacha, whatever how you type v'hi. Look, I'm saying it because I'm supposed to teaching the word. 1 second, the teaching the word, he says, 1 second, it's a stream of consciousness going on right here. Because that's what he says, how do you megala in the helam? When you stand strong, lamed neged kol minei sheshum davar maribim. What the Frierdiker Rebbe showed by Yud Beis Tammuz, nothing's going to stop me. I'm on my path and get endict because it doesn't make sense. It's a akshonas de kedusha, absolutely. Or the Rebbe Rashab, when they were standing the section, Purim, the last Purim, Tafresh Pei, and they had money on the table, and they were bringing. They were doing things that were mamish, a crime against the state. And Rebbe Rashab said, "Alt bottles a header, klippes ein header, ksishke metzias."
What about all the stories that were stopped by the guy?
Okay, I spoke about.
Yeah.
So it was Eis Ratzon Purim.
People didn't get out of the dungeon, when they were...
I'm just saying that to me, that's because Golus is a state of Helen. There was times, Eis Ratzon, when you have, I understand, why didn't the Rebbe use those keiches during the Holocaust? Ich verstehe sehr good. I'm just saying that, but the bottom line is the Jewish attitude was, I don't care whether we have 2,000 years of Golus, we do not give up. We will stand strong. It's basically, you go against the grain of nature is that if 2,000 years you're still being beat up, you finally give up, and we don't. It's a tremendous tribute.
A lot of people are giving up.
You and I are still here.
Right.
That's all that matters to me. I don't think about other people. I was around the Rebbe. If the Rabbeim, the Frierdiker Rebbe, had listened to any of his chassidim, the whole thing would have been over.
Even in Russia.
Yeah. Tough shin when he came to America, for sure.
Even before that.
Yeah. So thank God, not everybody looks at everybody else. Look, I have to say one thing. You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. That's what it comes down to. And you have to make a decision. Look, of course, I could sit there to give you a whole forecast about how bad good. But that's, we have to have, it's just not it's an approach that I think doesn't, to me, doesn't make sense. I can't live my life like that. Basically, a life like that is living in fear, and you're always waiting for some miracle to happen.
I remember before Y2K, everybody was living in fear that everything was going to come to an end.
One second. But one thing you got to say, we have a good track record. I'm sure obituaries were written, not now, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and no one believed that Jews would have what they have today. In Echanami, I understand the premise is a Golos Primi, a Tifa Golos Primi, and all that. But if the marathon run, we're still in the marathon. We may be limping, wounded, scarred, whatever, but we're here. That to me is 2,000 years ago we started Golos. You'd say to me, I don't know if we're going to make it. But now, to say that we limped, but we got here. If I can't, I sometimes see the miyut halavavis shebederenu is itself a miracle. If we had not that way, and we're still here. So what does that mean? So someone told me, the power of brainwashing is so powerful. That's it. So I said, it's true, it is powerful, but Judaism is not just, Judaism brought a lot of beauty to this world. There's a lot of chesed, there's a lot of, it's not just of some type of, so fine. A lot of people have to go with, there was a certain intensity. So that's how you break through the hell. Let's put it this way, as Pascal's wager goes, I'd rather come up in heaven and find out that the whole thing was not true and live the life as if it was, than live a life as it wasn't true and find out later it was. That's his gamble.
That's for eternity.
Yeah, right. So bottom line is like this. I think from a psychological point of view, and I talk mamish, the idea that every helen that comes your way you could conquer, that doesn't mean you always do, and it doesn't mean that it's easy, is a tremendous empowerment to a person. When it just gives you a certain sense. I meet too many people who have given up, who have been weakened, who don't have that enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is domain of children, most people say. Who's excited? They're naive little kids. They didn't see the world yet. That's more or less the attitude. Look at your own children. And you look at them, you say, hey, one of those times, what day they're going to find out what we know.
You haven't been hurt by people's coolness, yeah.
So we were all once such...
Never will be.
It's inevitable that they're not going to be touched by it. The question is how they're going to deal with it. So, I'll tell you, we're all this type of children. Thank God, I could say thank God that Rebbe existed. So I saw the enthusiasm even going to an adult, led by the Rebbe. Didn't lose that enthusiasm. So that's tremendous. Because if you can still hold on to it, even when you do see you're not naive, that's a chiddush. That to me is worth, that's the people I want to hang around with. And I say it to everybody. Hang around with people that have the seasoning and are not naive. Of course, a person who never seen any challenge, what did he know? We're talking about people who are what do they call them? War,
Vets.
a war, not vets, war-torn, not war-torn,
Veteran, no.
war-scarred, like, been through the battles. And they still have that. That's tremendous. I heard battle scar and so on. They're war weary or something. There's a word for it. They went through, Friedrich Rebbe is in a wheelchair, coming tough shin and saying we're to conquer the world. He asked people who were there, they said it was completely nishbegeder b'derech. Yeah. That Friedrich Rebbe writes in his diary. He says that after he said that we're going to conquer America and there'll be bochrim running around with tzitzis and beret and tefillin and all yeshivas. So the Rebbe writes. So he said my closest chassidim came in to see me, and they told me, Rebbe, I had covered the cover of your holy father, the cover of your holy grandfather. They invoked all the kfeid kedushas all the way to the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov. We don't want you to be disappointed and hurt. So this is not happening, basically.
Take a little rest.
He should calm down. So Friedrich Rebbe writes, you can imagine the tears that came out of my eyes the first night on American soil.
They really thought that it wasn't possible.
It wasn't destroyed.
They was thought that they thought they were honoring the Rebbe with this. They came and they were not.
They look like a fool.
Was you such atheist? No, that naive, or he's still living in the old shtetl, Slobavitch.
Or maybe they didn't know America then,
It doesn't matter. But this is not. And Mordechai didn't bow to Haman. You can imagine, I guess, the Jewish establishment say, bow a little, you have to rock the boat, etc. I'm sure. Was machst du? Haman get inside, and suddenly there's going to be a Holocaust. So you bow to Hitler. Big thing. This is the story of all history. I'm saying, why am I saying? Because you don't always find a chapter. But Friedrich Rebbe, by the way, has my monim where he talks very strongly, especially in Peizai in those years. It's very strong about Mesiras Nefesh for Tenekah Shel Beis Rabbon. Tremendous stuff, tremendous. Huh? So let's continue chapter Reish Chavov. At least begin. V'zeu Masha Kosher B'zeh Pasha Bolak. And all this is hinted to in Pasha Bolak. The Hest, in one few lines, the whole part, the Kiasisa Pella, I'll post the Kiasisa Pella. Again, remember, this Aleph Pella, which he started going back to, is going back all the way to which chapter? Let me just, for the record.
When you started learning Zayah, you remember this pasuk?
First of all, since when did I start learning Zayah exactly? I always looked at Zayah, I always wanted to learn every Shabbos, the Pasha of Zayah, to be honest. The problem is there's some places you get to that are just umeglach.
But there's Taichin, there's Zayah.
No, I know, very good Taichin, but the cryptic stuff, there's beautiful. Zayah is like Medrash, in some places, made it Dikemaisis. I found the whole thing that I use now with the psychology thing. The Zayah speaks about Refuah, two types of how God gave Refuah to the world. Anyway, so where did the Zayah? Well, you see the godless of the Alter Rebbe in Birei HaZayar, by the way. How he takes a Zayar? Nobody did that. This whole Zayar is the Alter Rebbe's beard in the Zayar. It's 3 lines, 4 lines. You read it, it's like so cryptic. Okay, this, I saw this, I saw that, Aleph, Pella, and Gendik Weiter. Ganze Meise from this. And it fits. You go to the Zayar, it's not forced.
What about Barry's also?
Yeah, no, they're all, they don't need my Ascoma to be giants, but you see it, Begoli Mamish. Anyway, so the whole Zayar began, obviously, with Kasisa Pella, this chapter right here. We all know where it is. Chapter Kuf Pei Dalet. Just for the record, 184. The Aleph Pella, then he started first with Arimimcha Kelikei HaMelech, Bitla Klipa, and then Acher Kol Zeh Kasisa Pella, chapter 187. And then 192, I think, started the Pirush we're talking now. And trust me, there's another Pirush in Zayar, which is even deeper than the one we're talking now. So what are we talking now? This is now he's explaining. Ki asisa pella kisur v'levusha. Pella, remember now, is kisur. You created a kisui, a covering, and a levush, a garment to what? He said, chachmas timah, to atik. Dover acher, ki asisa pella, ki asisa aleph. The second interpretation that we had already learned earlier, aleph bina. So Aleph is Gilui going down. Aleph is education. We said Aleph, Lashon, what did you say before? Ulfana, right? Ulfana, yeah. Shaftaman B'Sas. Pella is the kafaket. It's a malemes lekeser. The chachma is malemes lekeser. We explained what that is. The chachmas tamara is a levush atzmi to keser atzmi, to atik, right? It's the helam atzmi. So before we learned it in a positive way. Now he's explaining how it comes down lamata. Remember I asked the question, wow, so how do we suddenly get the helam legriyusa? So he said because the cheshach atzmi lamaila is revealed in the cheshach atzmi lamata, and that's what he's going to say. What does this mean? V'hainu shapela yeh b'chinas aleph. That's the two interpretations. Pele kisur levusha, the same Asis aleph becomes aleph. Vigili shapela ba'atzmi is gal. Mesichis ela vigili. Sorry. Yeah. That pele should become ela vigili, should become like an educator and a revelation. Shapela ba'atzmi is gal. That the pele, which we're talking here, is pele is the helam atzmi itself, should be revealed. And how? That's through the hester, the concealment, and that comes through this covering and this pella. Remember, pella is also wonder. It's hidden. So basically, pella kisur v'levusha, through the hester of pella, through that becomes the gili of pella atzmi. Right? That's what we just learned. So let's touch it again. That the pella, ha'idea hester, through the pella, through the concealment that the pella, that the kisei pella created, through that comes the gili of pella. What does that mean? That when you, but premius, it's really gili. How do you reveal it? By dealing with the helam, by fighting the helam, or like you said, more than that, through transforming the helam, turning it into a catalyst for forward thrust, right? So these lines have to be read very detailed. And then via gili b'yeses, then the gili will be how do you say b'yeses? Far stronger and far more powerful, even from Matan Torah. Mitzrayim, he said, let the Matan Torah was also a gili eratzmi. But here, because the cheshach, you took it even deeper, it'll be even higher than Matan Torah. Like it says, la'asad lavi. Ayin ba'ayin, eye to eye, we shall see, you will see. Eye to eye is a very big gili. What does that mean? That means mamish seeing elokus. The Matan Torah yirak sheminus hanira. By Matan Torah, we only heard that which was seen.
We also saw
we heard what was heard, but we didn't see what was seen.
Okay.
That's interesting. Now it's seeing the real thing.
Yeah.
Here it says, "Shebchinas muhus ein sof hayitzlam bchinas shmir levad." That's interesting. I think he touched it that way earlier, but that's a beautiful type because usually sheminus hanira, you think you see. It's like saying you only
saw that what was heard.
Oh, if I can, here it says sheminus hanira. You only heard the real muhus.
Right. Or we only saw what was heard. We didn't see what.
Yeah, Shabchinas Muhusa Ein Sof Hayitzlam B'chinas Shmir Levad. Muhusa Ein Sof, which is the nida, the real nida, the real thing to see, they only got in the form of hearing it. Well, Yemesa Mashiach, in Mashiach's days, Yeh B'chinas Riyah Mamish. You'll Mamish see, you'll be Reyanes HaNida. Meaning Reyanes HaMuhus, that's what it means. V'kol Zeh Huay Veda Achsha Ba'alamas V'Esteirim. How do you get there? Has to work now in the concealments and in the coverings. Wow. So in the Veda, in the Alamas V'Esteirim, and transforming that, the Pella becomes Aleph. Read it for a little more. Is it 9?
It's 9:06.
Okay, we'll stop here. So we did the parentheses in the end of chapter 225 and the beginning of 226, page 457.